Today, you're going to learn a lot about color, you're going to learn about whites, and you're going to learn a lot about West Fraser, our guest today. West, welcome.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for the invitation to join you today.
We love it. So tell us where you are. You're in your studio, obviously, and where is your studio?
My studio is in Charleston, South Carolina, in what is called the Confederate Home for Orphans and Widows. It's a very old building, and this is where I spend the majority of my time. Social distancing came easy for me.
Yeah, well, that's the life of an artist. It's like, what's changed, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you also have a studio in Costa Rica, I understand.
I do. My wife and I spend half a year there in Guanacaste on the Pacific West Coast. And I built the ideal studio there, a standalone building, not far from our residence. And it's sort of like heaven. So
nice.
You'll have to come down and visit.
I'll do that. And do you, when you're in Costa Rica, do you do a lot of plein air painting down there and paint that subject matter, or I'm just curious?
Eric, I'm still doing some plein air painting, but not as much as I used to.
Okay.
I painted for 30 years, nothing but plein air.
I know that.
And now I'm using it more as a study tool to do more exhibition style paintings. And today I'll be talking about this painting behind me that is basically done as a study for a larger painting that I've just started laying in.
Okay. And also, you said you're going to talk about color and some white. Tell us what you're going to talk about there.
Well, when I had just done this painting, and I was invited to join you, I decided to make a study lesson out of the painting. And so it's really, I'm going to talk about white and white paintings and art history, as well as color temperature. And I think color temperature is probably one of the main crucial elements of creating light.
And one of the most misunderstood elements, probably.
Could be.
Yeah. I certainly know I continue to struggle with it, so I'm very anxious to see this. Well, West, we're going to drop off, make a couple announcements, and we'll be back with you in just a minute.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, that is West Fraser, and West is a legend, fabulous painter. Wait till you see his work. You're going to just go nuts. This guy is a rock star. My name is Eric Rhoads. I don't think I introduced myself. I run a couple of art magazines. One's called Fine Art Connoisseur, the other Plein Air magazine. We have a bunch of newsletters, conferences, events, artistry treats, books, products. We do a lot of different things. And our whole goal is, because I'm an artist, I started creating things that I wanted, that I would like to see. And so we have all these different tools for training you and developing you and getting you to the next level and helping you grow as an artist. And so anyway, the reason I'm doing these, now today is day number 176 in a row, no days off. And the idea is that we want to inspire you, give you something else to think about other than all the bad news that's going around, and to help you have some fun, because we have to keep ourselves healthy and happy and having some fun. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things that are happening. First off, we're really pleased. Continues Plein Air magazine is the #1 selling art magazine nationwide, outsells all art and photography magazines in Barnes & Noble nationally. We're very proud of that. And we're also very proud that the magazine has just been accepted into and brought into Michael's stores, 278 stores. It's the only art magazine that they carry. We're really happy about that. And although they should carry them all, quite frankly, we think our competitors are good. We support our competitors, and we want them to succeed too. But in the meantime, pick one up at Michael's or Barnes & Noble. We would like that very much. It's going to help you. It's going to help us. It helps everybody. We're also taking a group to Russia. This time next year, we'll be in Russia, and we're going to be painting the big cities of St. Petersburg and Moscow. and touring them and going to the great museums, including private entry into the Hermitage Museum, which means just our little group of 50 people in the Hermitage all by ourselves. That's going to be very cool. We're also going to the great Russian museums to see the great Russian art, and we're going into the small villages. We don't have the pricing up on the webpage yet, but we're very close to that, and it should be this week or early next week. And just go there and put your name in if you're interested in learning more. We can only take 50 people, and we're going to kind of take them first come, first serve. We just ask that you're healthy, right? Because we're going to be in small villages where it's going to be tough to get health care. And so you got to be able to walk around and be able to get around on your own. And unfortunately, there won't be any access. It's different in Russia than it is in America. So it's not quite as easy if you have problems and you need special care. So just keep that in mind. This weekend, I will be doing Sunday coffee on Sunday morning. I'm, of course, here every day at 12 noon, but every Sunday morning I do Sunday coffee, which is kind of my philosophy page. And it was written to kind of help my kids get through life. They're not going to pay attention to it now because they're in college, but maybe one day they'll look at it and read it, and maybe they'll get something out of it. Now we're going to go right to our guest, West Fraser. Welcome back, West.
Thank you. Sounds like you've got a busy schedule there, Eric.
Trying to keep up. So, tell us what you're going to do now. I'm curious about, you're going to work on this painting, or you're going to use this painting as an example? Help me understand what the lesson is going to be. So,
to me, a painting is really all about creating an illusion, and that's all we do. And the tools we have to create that illusion are the pigments on your palette. So what I'm going to try to do is take your guest through the steps and the thought processes that I went through at creating this painting. And this painting is predominantly in the white family, and there have been many white paintings of fame in the past. And my favorite painting almost of all time, one of them is James McNeill Whistler's the White Girl, or Symphony in White No. 1. Now, when he painted this in 1863, it was submitted to the Salon, refused, and it was exhibited in Napoleon III's Salon de Refuse. And he painted it in a tonal manner. Now, a tone is a color with white with black added, or a shade is with white with black. A tone is pigment with white added. So in his painting, The White Girl, he created a flat pattern painting, which was avant-garde and scandalous at the time. But you'll notice that there's not a whole lot of color nuance of light and reflection, etc. It's more just white, flat light, and patterning. Now, that's very different from what Joaquin Sorolla did. And Joaquin Sorolla was born the same year that Whistler submitted this painting to the Salon. So that's the next slide, Eric.
There are two Sorolla paintings. Which one do you want?
The mother and child.
All right.
So in this painting in 1895, this was a transition period when artists had more color theory. They had more choice of pigments. And Sorolla was really keen with his color and creating a sense of light. You'll see in this the cool light and warm shadows. It's very, very subtle. It's probably a couple of windows that the bed is next to. You see a warm shadow going across the bed. And then you see some really cool, darker shadows that are influenced by the dark ceiling of the room, obviously. And then you'll see a gradation of warm over to cool on the far wall. but this is a painting of light using subtle temperature changes in white. Now, the other painting of Soroya's, Sowing the Sails, it's one of my favorite paintings of all time. And this is a different kind of handling of white in a painting. And this is more a dappled light. So it's obvious light source or obvious light color. So the color of the light is what is in the white of the sail. The shadows of the sail is either a direct shadow or or the color is a bounced shadow color. So that's what I'm going to try to share with your viewers today. I went into the coast of Georgia recently, took my boat in searching for new subject matter, and I found a wealth of subject matter. And the painting here that I'm going to share and talk through was done on from St. Catherine's Island in Georgia, which is a completely undeveloped 12-mile island with white sand beaches. And this is an inlet that comes in from the ocean directly into an estuary, marsh estuary on the ocean side of the island. It's completely unique. There's not, I don't know of any other big sea islands that have this type of terrain. So if you'll go to slide 1, Eric, that shows my palette. So the warms and cools I've designated, and that's pretty obvious. I think people understand what that is. And I will say that if you add white to a color, it cools it off. But the game and the challenge and the problem solving is what I'm hoping to take you through. Let's show the next slide. Now, these are just the tools. So as I say, painting, making a painting is not unlike making music. It's only pleasing if you masterfully organize the chords, notes, and melody. And the palette you have of pigments is your keyboard and the only tools you have for composing a symphony. So the object called a painting is merely a perceived illusion, and you have to make the illusion believable. So I'm going to give you the tools. One of the tools is to remember that your greatest contrast is the complementary color. Everybody, all of your viewers know all about complementary colors. Let's go to the next slide.
I would not assume that. I think it would be worth explaining.
Okay, well, complementary color, the example here I have with the bar is blue and orange. And on a color wheel, you just take the exact opposite color. So yellow and purple, yellow, green, and red, violet, green and red, blue, green, and red, orange, etc. Those are your complements. And you mix them together and in certain proportions, then you get black. So an interesting note, orange and blue proportions are 2 to 3. So it takes 3 proportions of blue to 2 proportions of orange to make black. Yellow, it's 3 proportions of purple to 1 proportion of yellow to make black. And red and green are equal proportions. So you also use that when you're trying to develop a harmony in a painting. You have to consider, oftentimes people make paintings that are way too dominant in intensity or color or something. So some of these tools I'm going to help you with, but to show how not to do that. But that's actually not the lesson today. The lesson today is about color temperature. So let's see the next slide. These are some things to consider as well. The very hottest color in pigments is orange, and the coolest is blue-green. The very brightest color hue is yellow, and the darkest is violet. Okay, so those are considerations. If you're working on a passage of form, if you can stay within that form by keeping analogous family colors. So from yellow to blue violet, that's analogous. But and from yellow to red violet, those are analogous. They're in the same family where you don't quite go to the complement. And this also helps with if you're cooling or warming off a hue, you can, if you stay within close to those analogies, then you can cool off a color instead of making it muddy. Okay, so the next, those are your perceived contrasts. And the next slide, this is very important, and it's helped me tremendously in developing paintings over the years. Obviously, I've shown you again, reiterated the cool and warm of colors, but the emotive contrast, where I have listed in the middle, I find most people don't consider. And these are from studies I made on my own from Johannes Itten, and from experience and just delving into and reading and finding these little tidbits and snippets of information, and then trying to figure out how to make them apply to my work. I found that this lesson that I'm trying to do today of color temperature is one of the paramount lessons. So the emotive contrast. Warm is sunshine and cool is shadow. Warm is opaque and cool is transparent. So if you're doing a still life and you're having trouble determining how to make an object opaque compared to transparent, you consider transparent is warm or cooler, and opaque is warmer. And it's all about relationships. It's very subtle relationships that we're dealing with here. So, and then you've got your stimulant is warm, and a sedative is cool. Thick is warm, thin is cool, earthy is warm, airy is cool. That's extremely important. I reiterate it all the time when I'm teaching. The earth is always warm. If you're doing a passage of trees or you're doing anything that's of earth, it has to be warmer in comparison to the sky. So near is warm when you're setting up your darks in the foreground and your warms in the foreground. Everything recedes into a cooler space in the atmospheric perspective. That's another lesson. So heavy is warm and light and weight is cool. Dry is warm. Wet is cool. That's a major part of this lesson today. And then animate, again with earthy, animate is warm and inanimate is cool. So let that.
So what do you mean by stimulant and sedative?
Well, these are emotive qualities that Johannes Itten and some other color scientists discovered. Some of these things, like stimulant and sedative, are really more relatable to, say, interior decorators or restaurateurs when they choose a color for their restaurant, okay? Or a doctor's office. If you don't want people to fall asleep in a doctor's office, you would use a warmer color. Or if you want people to be calm, sedative, you would use a cooler color. Understand that?
So if you're trying to create a mood that makes people like chill out or relax when they watch it, then you're going for the cool side. I get it now.
Correct. And sometimes it's applicable to a painting. I would think probably more so in an abstract painting, But also, if you're dealing with a color theme in a realistic traditional painting, it can be considered as well. These are tools when you're trying to problem solve and you're struggling with why is this not working. You can refer to these types of things.
All right, I've got your next slide up.
Okay, so I mentioned I went into the coast of Georgia, and it was a certain place that I had to get in and out pretty quickly. So I did not take my painting gear. It was more of a research trip. But I did jump out and make some sketches. And this, I do these, and I make my shorthand notes that help me figure out how to interpret a digital photograph when I get home. So I basically use the digital photographs as memory to jog my memory. And in reality, the things that I'm going through today is how you make a painting. I don't ever copy a photograph because photographs lie. And from my experience over the years and years of painting plein air and observing, I've come to terms and understanding that using this, what Joe Paquette calls a prismatic approach, um, you can develop a painting, you can create form intellectually, almost more so than observational. So purely observational would be trying to copy what you see exactly. And what I'm trying to convey today is that making a painting is more than just copying exactly, because that's more of the surface tension and surface look. What I'm trying to share is that what you really have to do is make the illusion that is believable. So,
You just briefly tell us about what a couple of your notes, like a 2 gray, I assume that's a 2 value gray.
yes, I'll do a less and more sign sometimes, and I'll do a percentage. It's almost too small for me, Eric, to see, but
Okay,
um,
yeah.
I show that the hot spot is reflected down in the water line. You'll see it in the painting. The grays in the sky, or I believe I noted that they're like 10% darker than the shadow sand area. Notes like that, and just comparisons and relationships.
All right.
It helps me interpret and remember what I saw. And like I said, the digital photograph just jogs the memory. All right, next
Okay.
slide. So this is the beginning block in. I have to admit, and I think it's important for students to realize that uh, you oftentimes have to scrape and start over again. So when I started the painting, I had the horizon way too high, and I just quickly scraped it all off. But actually, it gave me a nice tone to work with. So this is blocking in, establishing the warm darks on the left and the tree line, and the dark part of what will be the grass, and then the darks in the sand, as well as what the shapes of the grays and the cloud are going to be, a circular suggestion of where the hot spot's going to be, the temperature of the sky, values of the sky, etc.
Okay.
You can go to the next. So this is developing more of the values and the temperatures of the establishing the shadow and the sunlight. So the sunlight is that yellowish hot spot going right across from the center to the left, and also on what is a sandbar to the right, and so then I'm trying to deal with another important part of that was establishing the cool of the water. So going back again, um, and it's the value of the cool in that water with the blue greens is very similar to the value of the sunlight where the sun is hitting. So
Yeah,
how
so
do you?
that's confusing me because I would have looked at that blue green and said that's actually a very warm passage because it's got a lot of yellow in it.
Right, because yellow green. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, I used a combination of yellow green for the foreground where the sunlight is hitting the water, and right next to the sunlight hitting the sand. So you have to. Water has to be cool. So this is just establishing the relationships, and then in the distance, the water that behind the sandbar structure is more blue green because as it recedes, it cools off.
Right.
Do you
Okay.
see that
Now,
relationship? It's hard to
yeah.
see, but these are just intellectually things that you have to know, you have to consider, and you establish it, and then you can, noodle the painting and coax the colors in and out of the painting.
Okay.
Okay. And that was based on viridian and yellow, I believe, cadmium yellow light.
So is that yellow green a cool or is it a warm?
Yellow green is a cool, but it's warmer than any other cool.
Okay. All right.
So it's still in that cool family. And
Right.
water is cool compared to earth.
Right.
Earth is warm. So if you're trying to establish it was very important to establish the temperature and the color of that where the sun was hitting the sand. It's a major part of the painting where that sun is coming across. And so I had to early on establish this cool and warm relationship.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So then the next slide is just developing more uh, of the painting and the values of the painting, the tones. I grayed out the sky more, keeping it cool. Everything is cool. It's first. I wanted that sunshine on the sand established so that I knew how to gauge things around it, and I'm still just laying in the groundwork that I can work into with brighter, lighter, more intense colors as I go.
Okay.
Next one.
Am
Oh,
I on the right slide?
I think so. Yeah. There's a subtle difference in this, but I'm starting to develop a little bit more uh, in the sand. I'm warming it up where it's dry, keeping to the right where it's still wet from tidal changes is still staying cool because it's wetter, and I'm trying to establish the dry warmness of that sand in the middle, Eric,
You okay?
and a little bit more of the sky. I think I probably lightened up some of the gray in that horizon of the sky, and developed a little bit more of the grass. But what I'm really trying to do is that relationship of the gray and the clouds and the gray shadow of the sun. And one of the talking about muddy and mixtures, one of the problems I see in beginners' work is that they'll oftentimes uh, make a passage in a sky way too muddy, and that goes back to or warm and muddy, and that goes back to the idea that Earth is warm and air is cool. So I think the motive contrast terms I gave, you always kind of refer back to them.
All right. I've got the next slide up.
All right, so that shows what I have used so far. These are the blues of the sky, and uh, and it gradates from the blue green, yellow green, down closer to the horizon and closer to the sunspot, up through the blues into a violet at the top. The uh, the, the bright yellow ochre, I mean the Naples yellow, there near the blues, that's the sand, and then the cooler white that's next to the Naples, that's the lights in the cloud. So you can see a subtle difference of that Naples and the light in the clouds. The light in the clouds is cooler. And then to the right, you see the differences in the sand, the shadow part of the sand, and then a little bit of the cooler part, which is more of the wet sand. And that's the relationship that I like to show.
I'm going to go back to that other slide just so they
Okay.
can look at it now. Now you can see that gradation in the sky.
Yep,
You can see
exactly.
the variations in the sand. All right.
Exactly.
So now
And
I'll go back there.
I'll keep developing and moving that forward. And then
Okay,
so this one continues. Now, one thing you have to be careful of is you don't want to go too white or light in value too fast, because painting is sculpting. You're sculpting the forms that you're creating with the pigment. So you want to be sure that you start with darker, warmer in the earth, darker, cooler in the sky, that you paint around. You can always cover it, but it's very difficult to go back into thick white paint. That's when people make things very muddy. So I'm continuing to develop the reflection of the water on the right, and keeping in mind the emotive relationships of the temperature in the clouds and the sand, and especially the sunlight hitting the sand and striking the land. That's a Naples and cadmium orange mix for the sand, and more intensity of the pigments in the grass and the trees. I typically, when sunlight is hitting a form, I typically make that color more intense and warmer. That's how I connote usually sunlight on forms.
All right.
So the shadow over the sand, you can't make it too dark because the whole landscape I'm in is completely filled with light. You've got light bouncing off of the clouds. You've got light in the foreground that you're staring into. You know, it's just light filled. So everything is full of light. It's just a difference in temperature. The direct sunlight hitting the forms is much warmer. The light from the bounce light from the sky and the clouds is cooler. So the sand that I'm using, the sand color that I'm using, I'm taking a violet and adding Naples and yellow ochre to take it into a gray, and adding a little bit of iridium or blue green to it that cools it off. And I'm still trying to establish what color it is up near that hot spot in the sand where the sun is striking the sand. So you don't want that too dark. It would look like a ledge if it was too dark going up to it. So that's a relationship you have to establish, and how that is relating to the sky grays before you really start finishing out the painting.
Now, what I'm seeing there is, and maybe I'm not seeing it at all, but I think I'm seeing a movement from a yellow to a slight orange, which would be kind of moving through the spectrum. Is that like at the edge where the cool meets the light? It feels to me like it's a little orangier than the yellow there. Am I missing that? Or is that right?
Eric, on the sand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
Well,
the hot spot is, where the hot spot meets the sand.
right, where the sunlight hits the sand.
Yes.
Well, I probably adjusted it for value and intensity. And I remember I started off with more of a Naples and orange to lay it in to get started. So some of that orange, I like to layer things, and some of that more orange is underneath. It gives it some integrity. It gives it some weight. Uh, you'll see that throughout all of my paintings,
Yeah.
that there's always an undercurrent or an under painting of certain things.
All right. Terrific. Okay. Next slide. Looks like
So
this is called finish.
okay, so I knew in the very beginning of doing this painting uh, that the only way to create the illusion of light was to suggest a prismatic refraction effect in the sunspot. So this is a little bit more refined. I think we missed a slide, but that's okay.
Oh, well, let me go back to it. I have sunspot. This is number 13. Maybe
Okay.
we have.
All right. Hold that one for a second. In
Okay.
the sunspot in the sky, you'll see that the sun is yellow. Now go to the next slide. You'll see how I turned the yellow. I took the complement, which is violet, and I mixed a violet white, and placed that on the yellow. So it's violet surrounded by yellow, and that is the way to get the highest contrast.
Really?
So you'll see that it's not a color necessary. It doesn't necessarily look yellow, but it is the highest, brightest point in the whole painting, which is what I'm trying to base everything off of. So, and then to get to the finish, I have to create the illusion of, in the blue part of the sky, it's influenced by the warm sun. So it goes I start placing in some yellow greens around the sun, and into, I think maybe in the next slide it'll show it, a little bit more adjustment of the color of the sky near the sun, and then it immediately goes away into the blue greens and then the blues and then the violets, as well as in the water on the bottom right, picking up a little bit more the color of the color in the clouds or the sunspot. Some in still water that's within the sand there, you'll see kind of a textural part of the sand, and that's still water, and it will have a direct reflection, whereas moving water of any kind diffuses the direct reflection just a little bit, even if it's still water. But the little pockets of water captured by the sand is absolutely still. So it's reflecting much more of that yellow green in the hot spot of the sky, and the violets and the etc. from that area is reflected down there in that passage of the water. And then you'll also notice on the left-hand side where the sand, the plane of the sand is not rising up out of the water, but it's flattening off and falling back away from the sun. And so there's passages in there that are still white, but they're much cooler because it's reflecting the sky above. It's much cooler than on the middle sand that on the right-hand side of that clump of grass, it's much warmer because it is picking up the light
Mm,
reflected from the heat of the clouds in the distance.
mm. Wow. I'm overwhelmed. I thought I knew something about painting. I know nothing.
Well, I'm
You,
not sure
you,
it's profound, but
it is profound and it's incredible. Just, you need a whole lifetime to figure this out.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, you do. And but maybe I'll jumpstart some people's curiosity with these lessons.
absolutely. All right. Next slide.
I believe that's the final picture, which here I have here on the
Well, I
easel.
have the palette end. Did you want me to show that?
And then this is the end palette. Now, typically, I don't keep all the colors, but for this lesson, I kept all the colors the predominant colors that I mixed. So you look at this palette and you think, how did he create light with that palette? But this is basically what was used, and I've denoted different areas. I'm not the blue of the sky and the grays on the top left of the sand, and then the sky colors on the right hand side surrounded by the reds.
Wow.
And I had a teacher once tell me that at the end of the day, if you take all of the pigment on your palette and mix it all up, you know how you get the mud gray of a day of painting. Um, if it's gray, if it's a good solid gray, then your painting is probably in harmony. But if it's dominant, it's you've got way too much red, you've got way too much green, or you've got way too much yellow in that gray mix on your palette, then you probably need to make some adjustments in the harmony of your painting.
Wow. Fabulous. Okay. And then this is the
That's
final painting.
final painting, yes.
Yeah.
And you'll
Wow.
see the
I've
prismatic.
learned, I've learned so much, Wes.
Well, good. I think
Yeah.
to note to what's really important, when I started this painting, I knew I had to create a hot spot with a prismatic effect in that cloud. So you'll see it goes from yellow uh, through the colors of the prism within that wet cloud structure. And
Oh,
that's the part of the illusion. That's part of the intellectual signal to the subconscious mind that this is the source of the light, and what the source of the light, the color of the source of light is, because all of these visual cues reiterate and reinforce the viewer's subconscious knowledge from just living and noticing that water is wet and a puddle reflects things. And there's all this subconscious stuff that you have to play to when you're creating the illusion of reality.
so when you on in the yellow of the sun up there, that hot spot that to me looks like it looks like a white on top of the yellow. You're saying that that's a white with a little bit violet mixed in. Is that right?
Correct, because that's your greatest contrast. So that it's the greatest difference.
See, yeah,
So
because what I would have done there is I just would have laid down pure white, but then it makes it cooler.
it makes it cooler and it doesn't contrast as much.
Huh. Fascinating. Well, you've just confused me to death now. I'm going to have to go out and relearn everything I've about painting. This is terrific.
Well, call me anytime. I'll help you through it.
Wes, now you have a fabulous book called Painting the Southern Coast, The Art of West Fraser. Do you want to tell us about that real quickly and how we can find it?
Yes, it was published by the University of South Carolina Press. The second book they've done of mine, published in 2016. You can order it from my website, westfraserstudio.com. And it's about 300 color plates. It takes the viewer through the region that I was born in and that I've spent the majority of my time painting, the Georgia, South Carolina coast. And it takes you through the region by region. And I used maps to identify where the paintings were from. I could go on and on and on about the region, about the islands, the sea islands of Georgia, the heavy development, the lack of development, the virgin territory that I'm starting to go back into in Georgia. But the book really is sort of an introduction through paintings to really a big body of my life's work.
And then if we want to find your life's work, if we want to find a painting, if we want to buy one, we get that at Helena Fox. Is that right?
That's correct. Helena Fox Fine Art in Charleston. You find it by that website name. And also have some New York paintings at Kess Royal Fine Art in New York City.
Oh, that's a great gallery as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, if Lou Salerno is putting you in his gallery, that means you're a master extraordinaire.
Well, I was very honored that he accepted me as a living artist, and except for COVID, I would have more paintings. But Eric, I started doing some New York urban paintings and became fascinated by the electronic billboards, and it gives me fun and pleasure creating the sense of man-made light through the color theory knowledge that I have. And so they're really pretty exciting paintings. You'll have to go look at them on his website.
All right. Well, Wes, this has been absolutely fabulous. What amazes me after talking to different artists every day is that I learn something new almost every day. And today you completely blew me away. There's so much new information that I had never heard before. And I'm just really re-energized and excited. I want to go out and try this. I made screenshots of your color wheels and the ideas behind them, because I think that's fabulous. I had never heard some of the things you talked about, like the cools for the puddles and so on. So the wet.
Well, Eric, you'll have to come. I'm teaching a class at the Lime Academy, American Academy of Landscape Painting, in just this color theory. So you'll have to maybe come join us.
Well, that'd be great. That's the academy Don Demers is heading up, and it's a fabulous academy and probably the best way in the world to learn how to paint, because it's got all the best instructors. So congratulations on that. It's good to see you, and hopefully I'll get a chance to study under you at the Lime Academy. That would be terrific. And also maybe I'll come visit you in Costa Rica sometime.
That's where we'll get a lot of work done if you come visit.
Yeah, I'll bet we will.
Yeah.
I better not bring Mrs. Rhoads, because if I'm painting the whole time, she won't want me to. She'll want to do a little sightseeing, I'm guessing.
Well,
but maybe
Helena can take her around.
Okay. Well, thank you, West, and thank you, Helena, as well. And that is West Fraser. I am absolutely blown away, and I know you are too, because we're all picking up new things just by watching every day. And what I've noticed is that they kind of they pop up in our brain when we find those challenges, and we have to deal with those challenges. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. I'm here every single day of the week, 12 noon. Want to be here for you guys and keep your head in the game, keep you focused on learning and growing and being inspired. I am so inspired by West Fraser today. So thank you, West Fraser and Helena Fox Galleries, and thank you guys for watching today. Bye-bye.